Devotees are tested to the point of infinity. Devotees are obliged to live in the fire and be purified. And only once you have been in the fire long enough does it begin to enlighten you. When you've burned up in it, then it's light. Until that time, it is heat. When there's nothing left to burn, then it's all radiant bliss, you see. Not before then. You all want to feel like enlightened people before you have been consumed, before you have become love, before you have made your tendencies obsolete, before you've transcended them in the way of devotion. Until that perfection, that perfect surrender, you see, you will feel the heat of practice. And anything, any moment that intervenes that is blissful, full of visions, kriyas and whatever else, you see, is a bauble. Something that will test you, you see, because you'll have this experience and then after that you will not have it. And so you'll waste a lot of time in the waiting for it to come back again, struggling to re-achieve it, you see. Where if your disposition is that of the devotee, you will simply be happy in any case. You will surrender yourself. You will give up all of these consolations of a mystical kind, as you must give up all of the consolations of an ordinary worldly kind. You must become ordinary. It's not that you're to become monks and nuns, but your participation in the things of life must become that of the devotee, the self-transcending personality, the one who surrenders in the midst of experience, who surrenders to God in direct communion. Therefore, you continue to act and experience in the ordinary range of things, but you are purified of your gross self-indulgence. You abandon those practices that do not characterize one who loves God. But all the rest of the ordinariness of it continues. And in the midst of that ordinariness, you must live as the devotee. In every moment, you are tested by the law, the demand of God, to surrender yourself, to transcend your experience. Not to do something in order to get another experience, but to transcend your experience, whatever it is in this moment, whatever it could be, whatever it has been. You must enter into self-transcending love communion with the living God. And your experience in this moment, however you might characterize it physically, mentally, and so forth, may very well continue for the time being. And the tendency to be in that state may again return. You must be purified of that, you see, and the only way to be purified of it is to surrender to God in any moment, in every moment. Surrender to God in the moment in which that tendency is in evidence, for instance. If you will simply surrender at all times, if you will simply enter into this love communion, then over time you'll see these phases, highs and lows of all kinds, change. Your experience will begin to become somewhat larger than it is at present, perhaps, including more of the psychic and higher mental qualities. But then the whole affair will begin to even out. It will cease to distract you, you see. It won't be a matter of time and phases. There will be one essential and eternal moment. And that moment begins to intensify. when you have ceased to be so mightily distracted by all the phases of experience, when you are purified of that, then the regenerative light begins to appear in the midst of this fire. So the mature devotee, you see, does generally feel pretty good. In his ordinary round. He's essentially healthy, not morbid, not neurotic, not obsessed. On the other hand, his attention is no longer fixed in those conditions in any case. Years before, if he could have just been in that state of body and mind, he would have perhaps thought it sufficient. Because relative to his tendencies, that is a kind of liberation, a kind of enlightenment. Now, the light of God is beginning to appear, replacing that fire. And that dimension in which he has now been purified is no longer of great significance. It's very ordinary. He's noticing how bad he feels at the edge of infinity. The subtleties of his separation seem to him to be monstrous. Whereas to everyone else's eye, you see, he looks saintly even. People who are saints, you see, are not exaggerating when they're always talking about themselves, their tendencies and so forth, and how they're the worst of men. So you've read people speaking in these terms, you see. And they're not talking about their cruder tendencies that they might have dramatized at some time or other. They're talking about a subtle sense they have of their own disinclination to be submissive to infinity, to God. They become more sensitive to that now, you see, now that the grosser dimension of life has become even. So in other words, this process of purification, or the fiery aspect of spiritual life, continues all one's life until the last cell goes up in flames. It never disappears completely as long as one lives. If it did, there would no longer be that goad that enables you to transcend yourself. If there were no suffering, no one would turn to God. If there were no death, no one would become reflective. So essentially you must understand, you must hear this teaching. And you are in the moment of practice in which the fire is present. And it becomes even more fiery. There are extraordinary experiences perhaps in the midst of that purification. But essentially it's a matter of fulfilling the law from moment to moment. And your attention is wedded to programs of gross distraction and self-involvement, mental and emotional and physical. And therefore this light, this radiance that confronts you in this way feels to you like a fire. The devotee in his early practice will feel profoundly frustrated at times. But that's how the process works, you see. That's how the obstructions of the body-mind are made obsolete. Not by conditioning, but by not being used. So when these conditions in your body-mind are not permitted to be indulged, they begin to sulk. Very much like a child does, you see. When you don't give a child what it wants, a tendency that you have habitually exercised acts like a child. It sulks when you do not fulfill it. Try to discipline yourself sexually, in terms of your diet, in terms of your amusements. You see how frustrated, how sulky you become. You become depressed. After a while, though, it becomes perfectly natural to live that way, and you no longer feel depressed. The tendencies have become obsolete, you see. They've been burned up. At least if they've been burned to the degree that you're no longer so sensitive to them, although if you went back and indulged your old way of life, you would quickly see that the habits return and are again resistive. So whatever qualities of the body-mind you indulge, you see, will insist on repetition. What do you think this stream of thinking is that's going on all the time? So as you sit back, making no effort to think, you observe that the mind is going on all the time. You have to continue to catch yourself. You're in the midst of some incredible drama every couple of seconds. What is that? That's not coming out of the heart of the universe, you see. That's structures of experience demanding repetition. At other times you feel this same process in the form of urges of a physical kind and in the form of emotions of a reactive kind. There's not only the endless stream of thinking, there's the endless stream of reactive emotions. That's also something you may observe in every moment. The constant change in your emotional state, and the changes are almost all changes from one reactive emotion to another. Not from bliss and then back to anger. From states of anger and relative self-involved pleasure and so forth, you see. And not only is the stream of reactive emotion constant, so also is the stream of physical states. The body may also be observed. In every moment it's making some demand or other. Eating, urinating, sexing. Every moment there's something going on. Some sort of cramp in the body, some sort of thing in the stomach, a headache, temperature, something. See? The body's constantly going through the stream of changes. And all of those changes, you see, demand fulfillment. They demand a like experience in the moment. You're haunted by experience, not merely by ghosts, which are themselves simply forms of experience, frozen moments. Your experiences haunt you in the form of tendencies that mechanically appear in every moment. None of that has anything to do with God. Neither the fulfillment nor the frustration of any of that has anything to do with God or how good you can feel. It's all possibility, and possibility at a very unimaginative level, you see. There's nothing creative about desire. And the truth of the matter is, when you start getting creative, you simply create more desires. Every now and then you have this passionate moment where you break through something and change something in your life, do something that has life in it. And the next moment, though, you are addicted to it in some fashion or other. There is romance, and then there's marriage. Marriage is a condition in which we are profoundly responsible at the level of relationship and feeling. It tests us in all kinds of ways. Romance doesn't do any of that. Romance is a kind of aesthetic absorption. Being in love in the fascinated sense, you see. It's essentially temporary. The real love of another obliges us to enter responsibly into contact with all kinds of tendencies in ourselves and in others. Well, spiritual life is really like marriage then, you see, and not like romance.